Greetings adventurers, and welcome to the Loot Goblin Marketplace. Dungeons & Dragons can make a lot of friend groups even stronger, but every once in a while you get a friend group that is worse off for having played at the game table together. I don't know what it is about tabletop role-playing games, but sometimes you have that one friend who is normally easy to get along with that suddenly cannot be reasoned with once you put a character sheet and some dice in front of them. I don't know, maybe the player's handbook whispers to them like some dark patron that keeps telling them to burn down that orphanage to amass more power, or maybe they were always this compulsive and you just never noticed before. Today's story is one that I find all too relatable because it's a situation where a close friend wants you to start playing D&D again with that one guy you just know will get on your nerves. Today's treasure was submitted by Shadow Ally X at lootgoblinstories@gmail.com, and it goes by the name "It is painful to live as a goblin, apparently." Let's start with the following. By the time of this story, I've been playing D&D and many other systems for 10ish years. Being Dungeon Master and player on and off, I have tried games with many different groups, and I guess I learned the hard way that one must choose his players, his Dungeon Master, and his playgroup very carefully. Otherwise, you'll end up smashing against a brick wall time and time again. This is one such story. It was a group of friends I knew in real life. After a while, I moved on to play with another group through Discord, mainly because my in real life group couldn't keep a game running for long, and I also didn't enjoy playing with one specific person in that group. Let's call him Eagle. To make a long story short, he had killed player characters off screen before, thrown players into very unfair fights, and had non-player characters die arbitrarily. He has been a long-time Dark Souls fan, and what he enjoys most about the setting is the desperation and the sense of powerlessness that the atmosphere can convey. And I'm not a fan of that style of play in a tabletop role-playing game. I do like Dark Souls as a series, but I like it for the dark fantasy, not the sense of hopelessness and it being nearly unwinnable. And if your DM likes it for those reasons, yeah, you're in for a rough time. Eagle, along with a close friend of mine, let's call him Dagon, told me that it had been a long time since we had played together and that I should join them. Reluctantly, I was eventually convinced to play, mainly because both of them told me that I was being unfair to Eagle, since it had been years since we last played together, and that I was judging him based on games that happened long ago. Dagon also tried to convince me that Eagle had changed for the better as a Dungeon Master, and sadly I fell into that one. Against my best judgment, I gave him another chance, and thus, after a lot of arguing and with Eagle being the Dungeon Master, we decided to play D&D 5th edition. We took some days for the character creation process. The Dungeon Master made a setting where a new continent had been found with ruins of old civilizations, and several groups had been sent out to explore that place. Adventurers from all over the world are heading there looking for treasure and fame. I asked if I could play a goblin. I was told that goblins in that setting are basically little more than beasts and were not among the civilized races. I asked if I could be an uplifted or civilized goblin of sorts, as a goblin working for a noble as a spy was what I had in mind. Eagle told me to leave it to him and not to worry about it. I also complained about the milestone system for leveling up, which he was using, but it depends a lot on the Dungeon Master to level us up at a good pace. I stated I had a bad experience before with other Dungeon Masters because I've had characters level up too slowly, at one point remaining at level 3 for 3 months. Eagle assured me we would level up at a good pace. My idea was to play a revived rogue, an archetype built around a character who had died and returned to life, only now beginning to remember it. I came up with the backstory involving an evil patron known as the Lord of Shadows, a being who consumed corpses left in darkness and granted power to those who worshipped him. It felt like exactly the kind of entity a goblin might pray to, and a believable reason for my character's return from death. In his new life, however, it's something he would try to distance himself from. Eagle even mentioned that I received unique boons as I succeeded in doing so. We began session 0 by doing a bit of role play for a prologue. There were 3 players and the scene was set as a flashback. Dagon's character, a member of a religious order, was traveling with a caravan when it was attacked by goblins, one of whom was my character. During the encounter, my character was believed to have been killed by Dagon's mentor, though not before several members of the caravan were slain by the goblins. Upon realizing that my character was actually alive, Dagon's mentor chose to take him in and teach him the ways of civilization, intending for him to atone for the harm he had caused. After this, I had a brief scene in which my character stood before his his patron, the Lord of Shadows, the patron declared that my character had failed him, and my character begged for his life. Ultimately, the Lord of Shadows granted him a second chance, reviving him without his memories. This served as the starting point for my backstory, establishing why my character knew of the other characters and providing an in-world explanation for how my character, raised in a savage environment, possessed knowledge beyond what would be normally expected of a goblin in such a setting. I also managed to roleplay the beginning of my character's story during session 0. Things were looking good thus far. In the next session, my character was confined to a cage for 6 months, during which he was taught common, morality, religion, law and order, and how to read and write. After this time skip, he was released, the campaign properly began, and the party was leveled up. This meant that my character gained an entire level up while imprisoned, effectively replacing any meaningful backstory development with an off-screen time skip. When I complained that my level up made little sense and undermined the narrative I had planned, Eagle explained that my character had been constantly trying to lockpick his way out and sneak out of the building during those 6 months. And that is how I leveled up as a level 2 rogue, with Eagle saying, "See, I told you that you'd level up quickly." When I complained about not being able to do anything before the adventure began, he explained that Dagon's character was about to be promoted within his religious order, while the other character would continue running his shop and earning money, starting the campaign with more resources than usual. When I asked why the campaign could not have begun earlier, at a point where this imbalance would not exist, he repeatedly acted as though he did not understand the question, regardless of how I phrased it. Eventually, I had no choice but to drop the issue. As a result, I ended up with a character who effectively had no backstory. When I asked about my starting gear, I was told that there was an unattended coin pouch conveniently sitting on a table. Shortly after, we encountered a gnome being forcefully thrown out of his home by his girlfriend, along with all of his belongings. As she chased him down the street, hurling pots and pans, he left his adventuring gear behind, which, conveniently enough, was perfectly sized for a small creature and therefore became mine. With no real backstory, ties, or even goals, and having just been released from a cage after 6 months, I joined the others in signing up for a boat to a new continent, since my character quite literally had nothing else to do. It really did seem like the session 0 was going a good direction. I do agree that it's a bit of an underwhelming session 1. I don't know if the Dungeon Master didn't know what to do with your character early on because of the whole losing their memory thing, but you basically got like a generic Bethesda style I escape prison and now suddenly I'm off to adventure style start. And don't get me wrong, I do actually think it's kind of funny that a gnome being chased out of his home is how you got your adventuring pack, but if you're going for a more serious tone, it is a bit of a mismatch. You're at a little bit of a disadvantage, but let's see how the story goes. After arriving on the new continent, we began exploring and eventually met a gnome named Fitmus, who was nervous but otherwise well-meaning. I spent time hunting and foraging, and after a few rolls, I discovered toxic plants, which I used to poison my arrows. I then encountered a panther and shot it in the head with one of those arrows. In hindsight, this was a bad idea on my part, but this was only pointed out after the panther was dead when Fitmus helpfully remarked, "Nice shot, shame we can't eat the meat now though." The session ended after we set up camp near a cave, which seemed like a reasonable place to begin. As Dagon drives me home, I air my concerns to him, explaining that my character had effectively been left without a backstory, and that this opening had deprived him of meaningful knowledge, since he never had the opportunity to read or speak anything beyond the bare basics taught to him while imprisoned. Dagon said that he would speak to Eagle about it. Before the next session, Dagon told me that Eagle's response was that these issues were my fault because nobody asked me to play a goblin, and he repeated verbatim the earlier justification for why I could not spend more time developing a backstory. So things were going just great. Once again, against my better judgment, I stayed, not wanting to leave after only one session, and giving the impression that I hadn't given Eagle a fair chance. We continued playing, exploring, and looking for a place to camp, and eventually we did. Then one of the things that only made the game worse happened. That same night, I woke up alone in the middle of a misty forest with the wounded hobgoblin in front of me, and a voice suddenly started sounding in my head, "Give me his soul." It was obvious it was the Lord of Shadows, but my character couldn't have known that, as he had not recovered any of his memories of his past life. So I asked, "Who are you?" I got, "Give me his soul." I asked, "Why are you asking me this again?" "Give me his soul." No matter what I said, "Give me his soul," was the answer. And the more I refused and hesitated, the more Eagle kept saying that, more agitated and angrier each time. In the end, I decided to walk away, and I got prompted to roll a will save, and luckily I rolled a nat 20, so I managed to get away. When I asked Eagle what my character gained from actively resisting the Lord of Shadows influence, his answer was simply nothing, on the grounds that I didn't actually do anything. When I said I wanted my character to betray the Lord of Shadows and leave him behind, I was told that I would first have to join him in order to do that. When I pointed out my character did not know who this entity was, Eagle responded by mocking the idea, asking whether I expected the Lord of Shadows to sit in front of your character, extend his hand and say, "Good day, my name is Peepo." He then said that I can't keep rolling nat 20s forever, implying that my character would eventually be forced to kill regardless of my choices. The blame for this was placed back on me again for having made the Lord of Shadows my patron at all, with Eagle arguing that I did not have to make an evil patron, then saying that my character was evil, so there was no reason for my character to refuse killing the wounded hobgoblin. With that still fresh, the following day passed without incident. The next night, however, I was once again pulled into the Misty Forest, this time with Dagon present. The hobgoblin had returned, now fully healed and armed. Eagle explained that because I had not killed him during the previous encounter, he had recovered, and I was now required to fight him. The fight itself was unfair. At one point, the hobgoblin successfully grappled my character. When Eagle asked about the penalties for being grappled, I told him it just reduces your speed to 0. He said, in that case, you're restrained, a much worse condition that you cannot do with a single dice roll. Despite this, I managed to land hits, clearly to Eagle's frustration, and with Dagon's help, the hobgoblin was eventually reduced to a dying state. Immediately afterward, the Lord of Shadows began shouting again, demanding, "Give me his soul." This time, a dagger materialized in my character's hand, and I killed the hobgoblin, violently tearing out his soul and delivering it to the patron. I was rewarded with that dagger as a spell-like ability for killing the hobgoblin, and it was a dagger I could summon and use my intelligence for attack and damage, which was fine, but I basically got it by getting railroaded into this unfair encounter, so it really didn't feel like a reward. I actually think that last sentence there kind of perfectly explains what's wrong with this situation. It's not that the Dark Patron trying to get you to kill this hobgoblin and getting a cool dagger out of it isn't a great sequence for a character trying to become more powerful and in line with their patron. The problem is you made it very clear since session 0 that your character, the moment he's going to be revived, is going to try to fight this influence, and for some reason he's surprised that you do it. You roll a nat 20, he lets you get away with it and says that you can't keep rolling that forever, implying that it's not really your choice. He also seems a little bitter that you actually ended up playing a goblin, even though he agreed with the backstory you presented and said that he'd make it work. If he really hated you playing a goblin so much, he really should have just shut it down outright. You might have got mad, maybe you even would have left, but I honestly think this is a discussion that had to be settled in session 0. Either you don't get to play a goblin, or he gets over it and he isn't bitter about you playing a goblin. Him saying okay and then kind of going back on it later on is just so much more frustrating than not letting you play a goblin to begin with. And it does seem like he's doing that with multiple aspects of your character, between your backstory, the selection of your race, how you want your narrative arc to go. You were actually pretty straightforward in the session 0. He nodded his head and then he decided to do his own thing anyways, and now he's surprised that there's pushback. You already knew he was like this and you over communicated, so at this point I feel like you've done all that you could. It really is a shame though, because I feel like there's parts of this story that I find entertaining, but because of how they're being implemented, it's just unsatisfying for you as the player to experience. There was really so much potential in this story. Let's continue. Several sessions went by, some of which I missed, but nothing eventful really happened. It's worth mentioning that our group didn't play on a consistent schedule. We played whenever we could rather than having a set weekly date and time, which makes it more difficult for me to play every session. The rest of the party left camp to explore and map a nearby mountain, with Dagon praising how Eagle can make even climbing a mountain a challenge later on, leaving my character behind with Fitmas. During this time, Fitmas and I began exploring the cave where we had been camping. We eventually moved through tunnels too narrow for humans, searching for valuable ores or anything of note. At one point we became separated, and then I heard Fitmus screaming from the end of a tunnel. When I reached him, I found Fitmus wrapped in spider webs, with a giant spider looking at me from above. I began asking basic questions about my surroundings, things my character would have been able to see immediately, like the distance of the spider, the distance to Fitmus, the size of the tunnel entrance, and the size of the spider. Eagle responded with visible annoyance, cutting me off by declaring, "As you ask yourself how big the spider is, the spider attacks." Any attempt to protest was dismissed with roll initiative. During the fight, Fitmus repeatedly insisted on throwing his torch into the webbing to burn the spider, an action that would have harmed him as well. To be frank, I did not trust Eagle, and I did not trust that this would end without serious consequences. I expected Fitmus to either be killed or permanently scarred for dramatic effect. Instead, I chose to fight the spider directly, using the dagger spell I had recently been given. After a difficult fight, and with some luck, I managed to kill the spider and free Fitmus. The next session, the rest of the party still hadn't returned, so Fitmus and I decided to keep exploring the cave now that the spider is gone. As we searched deeper, we discovered that the cave wasn't just a lair, it was a mine, rich with several valuable minerals. Eventually, we found another exit on the far side that led up a hill. Approaching carefully in stealth, we checked the opening and spotted another group of people camping just outside the exit. Fitmus started to get nervous, pointing out that we had no idea who these people were, what they were doing there, or where their loyalties were. With only two of us, if they turned out to be hostile, we would be as good as dead, and that we should kill them before they kill us. So, staying in character, I decided the safest option would be to wait until nightfall and kill them while they slept. When night finally fell, we moved in on the camp. Fitmus and I crept forward slowly, rolling stealth checks as we slipped between the tents. There were 3 people sleeping there. I made the first move, quietly slitting the throat of one of the women. She died quickly and without much struggle. Meanwhile, Eagle described how Fitmus went after another man, but it didn't go nearly as cleanly. Fitmus stabbed him and kept trying to drive the dagger deeper into his throat, while the man choked on his own blood. The whole thing turned messy and loud, and Fitmus started to panic. The noise woke up the 3rd member of the camp. He didn't have time to put on his armor, but he grabbed a sword and rushed to confront us. We had no choice but to fight him. The fight itself was fairly uneventful, and we managed to kill him as well. By the end of it, Fitmus was clearly shaken by what had happened, but the camp was cleared. None of them really knew who attacked them, and we dealt with the threat before they had a chance to act against us. It was also around this point that Eagle informed me that the woman I had killed was pregnant, something I apparently hadn't noticed until then. Eventually, the party returned and we showed them what we had found. We also told them what had happened at the other camp. Dagon mentioned that perhaps I should have tried to talk Fitmus out of their idea, since they were probably just letting their nerves get the better of them. Still, what's done is done and we must move forward. That night, however, we were attacked by some sort of undead creature that appeared out of nowhere. It looked like the man Fitmus and I had fought at the camp. After a knowledge check, I learned that the creature was a revenant, and that the man had returned seeking revenge on my character for what he had done. The fight was grueling, the revenant fought relentlessly to reach me, while Dagon stood between us to keep it from attacking me directly. In the end, we managed to defeat it, though not without cost. The revenant nearly killed Dagon in the process, and even tried to finish him off while he lay dying, despite Dagon not being its true target. After we finally managed to defeat the revenant, it simply whispered that it would return and that it would continue doing so until Fitmus and I were dead. It was also worth noting that we barely survived the encounter by the skin of our teeth. As a level 3 party, the revenant was far beyond what we should reasonably have been able to handle, and he's only going to come back stronger according to Eagle. I couldn't make it to the next session, and by the following session, Eagle and I were getting a ride from Dagon. Eagle had this shit-eating grin on his face, so I asked what happened in the last session. He said, "Bro, Fitmus." I immediately asked if he was alright. They said no. Then I asked if he had been killed. They said no again. Noticing they were answering very literally based on my exact wording, I asked if Fitmus had died. For some reason, Eagle said, "Not really," but Dagon corrected him and said that he had. It took several minutes of back and forth before they finally stopped making me guess and explain what had happened. It turns out that during the session they had me mapping out the mines and clearing the camp on the other side of it. Throughout the entire day, Fitmus had been unusually quiet and withdrawn. By the time they finished their work and returned to camp, they discovered that Fitmus had hanged himself. He left a note saying that he couldn't take it anymore, with Eagle saying that nobody talked to him all day, leading to him taking his own life. So the one NPC I got along with ended up killing himself on the one day I wasn't there over an action that had originally been his own idea, and after nobody really spoke to him the rest of the day following the Revenant attack. Eagle later told us that Fitmus had also done it because he believed it would spare the rest of us from the Revenant's wrath. Unfortunately, it accomplished nothing since the Revenant was truly after me. Okay, yeah, that's just completely frustrating start to finish. Holy edgelord DM. And once again, you nail it right on the head. Fitmus is controlled by the DM. The DM also is controlling your patron, the Lord of Shadows. When you originally went to the camp and killed them at night, I thought the Lord of Shadows would be happy. Apparently, he didn't absorb this soul for some reason. This soul comes back as a Revenant, and now this character kills himself off screen, and now the Dungeon Master is telling you, yeah, he did it for a reason. It's a dumb reason though that I came up with. It's not like the Revenant's gonna stop attacking you. So once again, even though there's potential in this campaign, we have another really unsatisfying storyline. And the fact that the woman was pregnant is kind of like a gotcha. Based on what you experienced with the spider fight, it's not like you can ask what's going on in that room. You never would have had an honest chance to check if the woman was pregnant because he just would have said, oh, she wakes up as you hesitate. So no matter what you did this entire session, it was a lose-lose. I'd be fuming a little bit too. Let's finish off the story. What I also found out in that session was the Revenant wasn't the only thing after me. The pregnant woman I'd killed came back as a Banshee, and she was after me as well. So now I had both a Banshee and a Revenant hunting me, creatures that would return every time we killed them and wouldn't stop until I was dead. I'm starting to think the DM has it out for you, man. To make matters worse, Eagle said he couldn't just remove the curse because it would undermine everything that had happened, and that my actions need to have consequences. In the end though, it felt very disproportionate to what I had done. Shortly after that, I had to take an extended break from the campaign because I was going on a family vacation to another country. Because of that, Eagle, the Dungeon Master, said my character would temporarily head to a nearby town, the first settlement established on this new continent, and would help the party from there while I was gone. He also mentioned that my character would be relatively safe there, since both the Banshee and the Revenant were intelligent enough to not try to attack him in broad daylight in a populated town, where they'd likely just be destroyed. While discussing this, I asked if my character could try to find a cleric in town to remove the curse. Eagle told me it wouldn't be that easy and repeated what he had said before about my actions having consequences. After a month away, I returned to the game. Before the session started, Eagle told me he wanted to talk, so we sat down. He opened the conversation by saying, I don't know what to do with your character. When I asked what he meant, he explained that my character needed to leave town for reasons he couldn't reveal yet, but if I did, the Banshee and the Revenant would kill me. So I asked him, then what am I supposed to do? His answer was simply roleplay. At that point, I replied, roleplay how I'm going to die? No thanks. And I told him I'd be dropping out of the campaign. Dagon told me what happened in the story after I left. Days after, according to him, a mafia group took over the town and captured both his character and mine. His character was tortured and proudly described how he passed all the constitution checks during the torture to avoid revealing the party's location, even after they cut off one of his fingers as a punishment for staying silent, even though he earned their respect. Meanwhile, my character was gutted right in front of him. When I pointed out how petty that felt, Dagon simply said to be fair, I had already left the campaign and my character's death served as character development for him. In the end, the campaign didn't last much longer. Like most games run by Eagle, it faded out after a few months and was never picked back up again. That was the last chance I chose to give him, and I'm better off for it. Since then, I found another role-playing group where I've been able to see multiple campaigns through to completion, both as a player and as a Dungeon Master. I'm even going to the wedding of the brother of someone from that group. That's how close we've become after several years. As for Eagle and Dagon, from what little I've heard, neither of them seems to have taken anything away from those experiences, nor do they believe anything ever went wrong, despite the game coming to a halt and never being picked up again. fan. But if that's the kind of game they enjoy, that's their choice. As for me, I'm glad I moved on. Wait a minute, so you're telling me that even the Revenant and the Banshee are robbed of a satisfying ending because the Mafia just randomly guts your character off screen for them? In a way that's kind of poetic. Literally no one gets a payoff ever in Eagle's campaigns, it seems like. The one constant seems to be no matter how good the setup is, he will never stick the landing. There probably are people who truly don't care. For them, it's all memes and one-shots, and honestly, sometimes I wish I was that way too. So yeah, I agree with you here. If that's the kind of game they want to play and they enjoy it, that's their choice. More power to them. I love to hear what you guys think in the comments. This was another fun story submitted at lootgoblinstories@gmail.com. I do enjoy that the vibes of the emails I've been getting have been frustrating campaigns in-game where the problems are in-game, as opposed to some stuff I've read on the Reddit before, which are like assault and battery that just happen to take place during the campaign. Like, dude, that's not a D&D problem. That's not a communication problem. That's just literal crime. So I can never be too hard on someone like Eagle, who's just a friend in real life that's a little bit annoying at the game table, but obviously you get along doing other stuff. So all you really have to do next time when someone says, hey, you want to play D&D with Eagle, you say, hell no, and just move on. Really glad to hear, though, that you found a group that seems to work better with you. So that's really awesome to hear. Really curious to hear in the comments if you guys have experienced a situation like this where it's a real life friend, they're annoying to play with, but that's about the extent of it. And as always, make sure to like and hype the video as it really helps the channel grow. And make sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And as always, I hope to see you in the next video. Farewell for now. I wanted to give D&D Dice a shout out, my favorite dice shop and where half of my paycheck goes to every month. They've got a lot of options, including their original 11-piece dice sets that they call the King of Crits series. Be sure to use the code LootGoblin to support the channel at dnddice.com, or you can just click the link down in that video description and it'll be added when you check out with your favorite dice. As an edgelord myself, my favorite collections are the Plague Doctor and Blood Hunter 11-piece sets, which I use alongside their Tomb of the Lich dice tower.